Hi, this is Matt Baker. One of the things that this channel is best known for is its family trees. Well, today I'm going to show you the ultimate family tree, the one that connects every single living thing on our planet, the evolutionary tree of life. Exactly 10 years ago, I created this similar chart, and ever since then, it's been one of Useful Chart's best-selling posters. Well, over the last few months, I've been working on a major update, not only improving the design, but also making sure that it lines up with the latest research. And today, I'm happy to announce that the new version is finally available. If you want to get a copy, just head over to our website, usefulcharts.com, or click the link in the description or pinned comment. While you're there, take note that for the first time ever, we've made this particular poster available in two sizes. There's our regular size, 24 by 36 inches, but there's also a jumbo size, 32 by 48 inches. Okay, so today's video is going to be the first in a series of videos that I'll be doing on evolution, mostly explaining the Tree of Life chart in detail. In episode 1, I'll be focusing on the very earliest forms of life and how they ended up leading to the three major kingdoms that most people are familiar with: plants, fungi, and animals. From there, I'll be going through invertebrates, such as mollusks and insects, as well as the earliest type of vertebrates, fish. In future episodes, we'll then take a look at reptiles and birds, mammals, including humans, the plant kingdom, and then finally, I'll be doing a bonus episode on the evidence for evolution. Okay, let's get to it. At the very bottom of this chart is LUCA, which stands for Last Universal Common Ancestor. This is the single-celled organism from which both bacteria and archaea evolved, as well as all other living things on the planet. Now, as to where LUCA and its ancestors came from, well, that is a question that falls outside of the theory of evolution, and therefore I won't be addressing it in this video. However, this doesn't mean that scientists have absolutely no clue about how the first living cells arose from non-living matter. There are actually several theories out there, and if you're interested in learning about them, just do a search for the term abiogenesis. I should also point out that I've put viruses over here, unconnected to the main tree. That's because we're still not sure exactly how viruses are related to life. They may represent a stage before the emergence of life, or they might be the result of some DNA or RNA escaping from a living cell. Either way, the main difference between anything living and a virus is that life can reproduce on its own, whereas a virus needs a living host in order to replicate. Nowadays, viruses are categorized into realms, of which 3 are shown on this chart. Duplo DNA vira includes viruses that are based on a double strand of DNA, hence duplo. These include the viruses that cause herpes, mono, and chickenpox. Vari-DNA vira includes various DNA-based viruses, such as the virus that caused smallpox, as well as the closely related monkeypox. However, most viruses that you're likely to be familiar with fall under ribovira because they are dependent on RNA rather than DNA. This includes the viruses that cause the common cold, as well as those that cause the flu, which is short for influenza. Take note that there is in fact a difference between a cold and a flu being the more serious of the two. But of course, more serious than both a cold or a flu is COVID, which is caused by a coronavirus. Coronaviruses fall under the nidoviralis category. Finally, take note that the ribovira also includes the viruses that cause measles, mumps, and rabies, as well as HIV. Okay, we're now ready to move up from LUCA to the earliest branches of life. 10 years ago, when I first made an evolution chart, it was thought that life initially went in 3 directions, which is why the previous version had 3 domains: bacteria, eukaryote, and archaea. However, nowadays the leading theory is that there should be only two domains, bacteria and archaea, with eukaryotes evolving out of archaea. Let's look at bacteria first. Bacteria is the type of single-celled life that we're most familiar with, because like viruses, they cause a lot of diseases. Take, for example, Streptococcus, which causes both strep throat and pneumonia, or Staphylococcus, which people often get in wounds. Both of these bacteria belong to the Bacillota phylum. An even larger bacteria phylum is Pseudomonadota. It includes the germs that cause E. coli, cholera, salmonella, meningitis, and worst of all, the bubonic plague, aka the Black Death, the most deadly pandemic in all of human history. But not all bacteria is bad. There's also good bacteria called probiotics, such as Lactobacillus, which is used to make yogurt and is good for our digestive systems. There's also Pelagibacteria, pelagus being Greek for of the sea. These bacteria live in the ocean and are super important for the Earth's overall ecosystem. Archaea are far less familiar to the average person. They were initially lumped together with bacteria, but are now understood to be quite distinct. In fact, they include some of the most extreme forms of single-celled life, such as those that live in super hot environments called thermophiles, and those that live in super salty environments called halophiles. However, archaea also includes a proposed superphylum called Asgard, named after the home of the gods in Norse mythology. It's from Asgard cells that the very first eukaryote cell is thought to have developed, around 2 billion years ago. Now, eukaryote cells differ from bacteria and archaea cells in that they are much larger and more complex, being comprised of many different parts, most notably a nucleus, which is where the cell's DNA is located. This contrasts with bacteria and archaea cells, which have DNA floating around in the middle. Another part of a eukaryote cell that you might be familiar with are the mitochondria, which are kind of like little energy factories. Interestingly, these came to exist within eukaryote cells via a process called endosymbiosis. Basically, a bacteria cell, similar to those Pelagibacteria I mentioned earlier, went inside an Asgard cell to create a sort of supercell. One example of these early type of supercells are amoebas. However, over time, these new kind of cells started to join together to form multi-celled organisms as well, such as brown algae, which is now placed in the SAR supergroup. But then there was yet another endosymbiosis event around 1 billion years ago. This time, a type of cyanobacteria entered a eukaryote cell to create archaeplastids, which have yet another special cell part called plastids. The most famous type of plastid is the chloroplast, which is used by plants to convert energy from the sun into a type of energy that can be transferred to other living things. As humans, all of the energy that we have comes from eating plants, or from eating animals that eat plants, or in rare cases, from eating animals that eat plants. Take note that some types of brown algae did not originally have plastids, but perhaps inherited them from red algae. Now take note that all of these early eukaryote life forms exist outside of the three main kingdoms, which are plants, fungi, and animals. At one time, these early eukaryotes were placed in a fourth kingdom called protists. And then later they were divided into a bunch of smaller kingdoms. But nowadays the exact classification has been left up in the air because scientists are still trying to figure out exactly how everything pieces together. Another big thing that has only been discovered quite recently is that fungi are actually more closely related to animals than they are to plants. This is because both fungi and animals evolved around 1 billion years ago from early opisthokonts, whereas plants did not. The term opisthokonт comes from a combination of Greek words that means something like rear pole. That's because simple opisthokonts have these sort of tail-like things called flagellum. Now for the rest of this episode, as well as episodes 2 and 3, I'll be focusing entirely on the animal branch. However, take note that in episode 4, I will be coming back to talk about both plants and fungi, so stay tuned for that. Anyhow, the earliest types of animals probably looked something like sea sponges, which, to be honest, don't really seem like animals, even though they are. You see, despite the fact that sea sponges don't move, they are in fact animals because they have animal cells, just like you and me. Corals, which belong to the same phylum as jellyfish, also don't move, but they at least have a very simple nervous system. And it is the nervous system that eventually allowed animals to evolve the ability to move, react, and eventually to think. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The other big thing that developed early on in the animal branch is bilateral symmetry. You only have to look in the mirror to understand what this is. It's the reason why you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms, 2 legs, etc. Basically, if you draw a line down the center of your body, or that of most animals, you get 2 sides that mirror each other. With the emergence of bilateria, animals went in 2 very different directions. There's the protostome branch and the deuterostome branch. These 2 terms mean mouth first and mouth second, referring to the different ways that animal embryos can develop. Most animals have a digestive system with a mouth on one end and an exit hole on the other. Protostomes develop the mouth first and then the exit hole, whereas deuterostomes do the opposite. The other big difference is that the protostome branch went on to produce life forms with an exoskeleton, or outer shell, like insects, for example. Whereas deuterostomes went on to produce life forms with an endoskeleton, meaning that they have their hard parts, called bones, on the inside. Let's look at protostomes first. The earliest types of protostomes were the ones that don't have exoskeletons, such as flatworms and earthworms. But then came mollusks, which do, such as snails and clams. The most interesting type of mollusks are the cephalopods, which include squid and octopuses. Their ancestors would have had shells too, but at some point they lost them. However, they gained something potentially better, eyes, very similar to our own, which is a great example of something called convergent evolution. These are instances where similar structures evolved independently of each other on different branches of the tree. Octopuses, in particular, are also among the most intelligent non-human animals on the planet, which just goes to show that there's no one branch on the tree that is necessarily more advanced than any other. Now, while I'm here, I'll point out the fact that most living things can be categorized according to the very old naming system developed by Swedish biologist Carl Linnaeus back in the 1700s. Linnaeus is the one who developed the ranking system that starts with kingdom and then proceeds through phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So, to make things clear, many species make up a genus. Many genera make up a family. Many families make up an order. Many orders make up a class. Many classes make up a phylum. And many phyla make up a kingdom. Now, since the 1700s, it's become clear that things are actually more complicated. And that's why there are often other category names inserted between the main ones, such as bilateria and protostomia. In these cases, those divisions are simply called a clade. Okay, next I want to start back at the protostome node and proceed up this time towards the insects. But first, I want to point out this event here, the Cambrian explosion, which occurred around 540 million years ago. You see, this is the point in which animal life started to go in a bunch of different directions, as evidenced by the wide variety of fossils that can be found after this point. However, it's important to remember that creatures with bones or shells leave better fossils. So it might just be that 540 million years ago was when shells and bones became more common. Regardless, it was around this time that the first tactopods evolved. Tactopod meaning organized feet. This category includes tardigrades, which look like tiny bears wearing hazmat suits. But more importantly, it includes the massive Arthropodophyllum, which has all the spiders, insects, and other creepy crawly things. These were the very first animals to leave the water and crawl onto land, although obviously some, like crabs and lobsters, still live in the sea. The very first arthropods would have looked something like this, kind of like a millipede. Note that it has a segmented body and lots of legs. All modern arthropods have the same basic body plan, but with modifications. For example, insects evolved to have only 6 remaining legs. However, another 6 of their former legs evolved to serve as mouth parts. In addition to this, most of these segments fused over time, so that insects are now left with only 3, the head, thorax, and abdomen. Contrast this with spiders, who, as you probably know, have 8 legs and only 2 segments. But what you probably didn't know is that most of their legs evolved from the same appendages that now serve as mouthparts in insects. Spiders' 2 mouthparts, or fangs, actually evolved from what used to be their antennae, and 2 of their former legs evolved to become pincers, which are much larger on the closely related scorpions. Another thing to note is that crabs are actually more closely related to insects, being that both of these groups evolved from early crustaceans. Insects, however, fall under the category of hexapods, because like I said, they all have 6 legs. Some insects also developed wings early on, such as dragonflies. But regardless of whether an insect crawls or flies, technically speaking, most insects are not bugs. Although the word bug is used casually to refer to any creepy crawly thing, from a scientific point of view, only those insects belonging to the Hemiptera order are true bugs. The largest category of insects is actually the Holometabola superorder. These are insects such as beetles and butterflies that go through a metamorphosis involving 4 stages: egg, larva, pupa, and adult. Included in this group is the Hymenoptera order, which includes both ants and bees, arguably some of the most intelligent insects due to their complex social structures. Okay, let's now go all the way back down to Bilateria and follow the deuterostome branch instead. First off, you'll notice starfish, which you might not think of as having bilateral symmetry, but which actually do, if you think of it this way. However, the most important deuterostome phylum is Chordata. Chordata includes lancelets as well as all the vertebrates, which are animals with backbones, protecting a column of nerves that run down the back. The earliest vertebrates would have looked similar to lampreys, which have a mouthful of teeth but no jaw. Now, once the jaw evolved, things went in 2 directions. On the one hand, we get fish with skeletons, primarily composed of cartilage, like sharks and rays. And on the other, we get fish with skeletons primarily made of bones, which are much harder. If we follow this bony fish line, we'll see that things once again split in 2. We get ray-finned fish and lobe-finned fish. The vast majority of fish that you're likely familiar with are ray-finned, meaning that they have simple fins like this that flap, helping the fish to swim in the water. All ray-finned fish belong to the Actinopterygii class, which contains about 50% of all known vertebrate species. Most of these, in turn, are teleosts, which can then be broken down into 2 main clades, the Autocephala and the Euteleostae. Autocephala includes catfish, sardines, tetras, and carp, with the carp order being the one that goldfish and koi belong to, as well as minnows. Whereas Euteleostae includes cod, salmon, and the percomorphs. Percomorphs are, evolutionary speaking, newer fish, in that they mostly developed after the extinction of the dinosaurs. They include edible fish like tuna, halibut, and perch, but also popular aquarium fish like guppies, cichlids, and bettas. And then there's one of the strangest fish of all, seahorses, named because they have upright heads that look like horses. Let me now tell you about lobe-finned fishes. Although far less common, they are super important in that it is from the lobed fin fish, or Sarcopterygi, that all land vertebrates descend. So as you can see from this diagram, lobe fins are more complex than ray fins. They have bones that look more like little limbs, which is basically what they are. Although lobed finfish just use them to flap and hence swim, this would later allow certain creatures to do a bit of crawling in shallow water as well. The main lobe-finned fish that are still around today are the coelacanths and the lungfish. And it is with them that we are going to end today's video. Next time, we'll continue up through the tetramorphs to the earliest tetrapods, who climbed onto the land and eventually evolved into amphibians, reptiles, dinosaurs, and so on. Okay, don't forget, if you want to get a copy of this brand new chart as a poster, you can do so right now by visiting our website, usefulcharts.com, or by clicking the link in the description or pinned comment. Thanks for watching.